Alright, I'm gonna try my best to make a speedy tutorial on how to make a soul container model change. I'm sure this will apply for a lot of stuff, maybe. In any case, create a folder. I'll name it Soul Container. Open Source 2 Viewer and navigate to Game Citadel Pack01 underscore directory VPK. Double click on that. Open Models. Scroll down. Find props underscore gameplay. Then find soul underscore container. Open that. Right click on soul container dot view model. See. Decompile and export. Do that as a GLTF. Find your folder we just created, soul container, and export there. Once it says export completed, you're good to go. You can close that and minimize source 2 viewer. Let's check here. Everything is there. Now you can open your version of Blender. File, import GLTF. Find the folder we just created and exported our GLTF from. And click on the one that is not underscore physics. Just click on the normal GLTF. That should import the model into your Blender. Now, importing GLTFs leaves an iconosphere and a collection. You can delete both of those. Now you can see the bone and the model. Now let's import the model we'll be replacing it with. For instance, I'm using an OBJ. I have the file saved to my desktop. So I've imported it. Ignore that. So now I have the mesh. Make sure to name the material something you like, preferably the same name as your mesh. Now let's scale it down to be the size of the soul container. You want to line it up so it's just about in the center. That looks good. From here, you can delete the soul container. And that leaves your model and the armature. Look up here, click on your mesh, and then click on the armature, Control P, pair with automatic weights. Now the armature and your mesh should be parented. I'm going to hide that. I'll go in here. I have material, but I don't see anything. Just to make sure it looks great in Blender, I'm going to add a texture, image texture, and I'm going to open the folder on my desktop where I have the model, and I'm going to assign the texture. That looks good. Now we're going to file, export as FBX. I'm just going to export to my desktop. Now we can minimize Blender. So now I have my FBX that contains my mesh parented to the armature. I'm going to double click on Deadlock with Tools. I'm going to create a new add-on. We'll call it whatever. I'm calling it flop container because it's floppa. So find your new add-on. Now hit Explore Content folder. Here we'll want to recreate the file path that we saw in Source 2 Viewer. So for instance, we want to create a folder called Models, Props underscore Gameplay, Soul container, and finally materials. In this folder we've just created, drag your FBX into your soul underscore container. Open source 2 viewer backup. Find source soul container again, right click it, decompile and export. Now instead of decompiling as a GLTF, we'll export as a view model. And we'll want that to go to this new file path we've just created. So I'll copy the file path, I'll paste it here, and now I'll export that. So now you should see your FBX, the view model, and the soul container DMX. That's the normal mesh. On top of that, we'll want to find your textures and put them in the materials folder. So now you should have a file structure similar to this. We can now, you know what, for feature proofing, copy the whole file structure you just created from models, paste that on your desktop, go in here and just delete everything. This is what we'll use to compile our final mod. Put that in a folder, let's call it, I'll just call it flop. So now I have a flop folder with the models file path. Open your new add-on with the tools. Wait for the tools to open. Now from here, if you type soul into the search bar up here, you'll see soul underscore container, and it'll be red, it'll compile with warnings. Double click on that. You'll see the soul container. Copy this name up here, next to render mesh file. Now delete the existing mesh. Then come up here, hit add, mesh, add meshes. And you'll want to double click on the FBX we've just created. Now you'll see the container. You'll see your mesh, I should say, in red. Come up here to render mesh file, paste soul container. Now, the other thing we'll need to do is create a default material group. Assuming you assigned your material correctly in Blender, you should see it pop up here. Now, minimize out of the model doc, and come up here to material editor. Hit new. We'll want to save as immediately. Save it to your materials folder in your file path. Whoop. Now I'll open my texture I've left in my folder. You see it shows up here. Now on this drop down right here, well, I shouldn't say drop down, but on these settings, scroll all the way down, click Use NPR Lighting, Self-Illumination, and Use Status Effects Proxy. Then for everything you don't have a material for, just turn it into a color or a slider. So for me, I just have a color image, so I'm going to turn everything else into a slider or a color. Now we can X out of that. You should see your material, your VMAT should be here. Let's open model doc back up. Now, in your default material group, hit this magnifying glass, open local browser, type the name of your material, double click it, and then we'll compile. And then you should see your mesh with its texture right there. From here, we can exit out of model doc, right click on our view model, file, soul container view model C, open that, and then here you can just drag over, Control C, copy that. Then we can minimize all of the tools, open the folder we created here, models, props, gameplay, soul container, and then in here we'll just paste. So you should see Soul Container View Model C. If you double click materials, you should see your material and all of its assigned textures. Now I can minimize out of that. I can close that. And to compile it, we'll open Source 2 Viewer. We'll click File, Create VPK from Folder, right-click New VPK, Add Existing Folder, and then select the folder we've created that contains our compiled models. It should look something like this. Double-click on it if you want to make sure. There it is. And then we can right-click New VPK, save VPK to disk, and then I already have it here, so I'm going to save it as pack03_directory. These numbers can be any numbers up to 99, I think. Now save that. Now if I open Deadlock, my Soul container should be... Whoops, I left the tools open. Now if I open Deadlock, you should see your Soul container reflected on the player model. There it is.